Hey guys, Jason with CV Customs. Hey, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for checking out the truck. This is easily my most important build. And what I'm going to do right now is lay it out for you why. Um, Problem is, I started this truck. It's been like a 4-year process. I started it before I started YouTube. Um, so what I've got is a bunch of pictures. But I'm going to tell you guys the story of why it's so important. And I'm going to show you the pictures and kind of get you caught up on how it got to where it's at, and now we can actually finish it. So the next set of videos are going to actually be us finishing the truck, electrical, interior, windows, putting the bed back on, all that fun stuff. Basically, quick, kind of what happened. This was my uncle's truck. It was his work truck. The man who owned it was the original owner. He bought it and started his business with this truck. My uncle raised me, and he passed away when I was young. Shortly after he passed away, I went to work for this guy, and I drove this truck. It was my first work truck, hauling off scrap metal as a 16-year-old kid. Tried to buy it for years, even after I wasn't working for him, and he just wasn't going to let it go. He started his business with this truck. When he passed away, he made sure I got it. He knew how important this truck was to me, just as important as it was to him. So we're going to fix this truck, and you guys will get the rest of the story in a second. Okay guys, my first time-lapse slideshow, get you caught up on the 75 International. This is what the truck looked like in its glory days when it was actually working. So the story of the truck. A man named Carl Swanson bought this truck brand new and had the box put on by Douglas, and he started his business with this truck. His business was Swanson's Hydraulic and Machine, and that's where my uncle worked. So the importance of this truck is that this was my uncle's work truck. I was raised by my grandma and grandpa and my aunt and uncle. I spent most of my time with my uncle, and he used to pick me up from baseball practice in this truck, just the way it looks right here in this picture. Yeah, my 8th grade year, my grandpa passed away. And then my freshman year of high school, so the very next year, it might have been more like a year and a half the way things work, but then my uncle passed away. Shortly after that, I went to Carl, the owner of this company, and I asked him if he needed help for the summer, so I started my first job at 15 and a half, 16, something like that. And I used to use this truck at that point to haul off scrap metal. So it was actually my first work truck. While my uncle was driving it, he always wanted a diesel, because this was in the early 90s when all the diesel pickups were coming out. And he finally got one, but the problem was he got the old IDIs, indirect injection engines. They were non-turboed, and it was just a dog, and he hated it. Now those engines, you can put a turbo on them and wake them right up, but that was all coming later. So he really wanted his truck back, and that's kind of where this whole thing came from. So yeah, so Carl would never sell it to me. He started his business with this truck, and he was going to keep it. When he passed away, though, he had told his son, who inherited the business and everything, that I wanted this truck, and his son made it happen for me. This is the day I picked it up. It actually sat right by that flagpole. It sat right here for about 12 years. That's where they pushed it to and parked it, and that's where it was. I went out and I picked it up. First thing I did was get the brakes working. Carl always told me to make sure it stops before you try and get it to start. And I had no question of whether or not I was going to fix this truck. So for me, it was a no-brainer to make the brakes work and then tear into the engine. It actually didn't take a whole lot to get it running, but we did go through the whole brakes at that time. Got the brakes going, and I put it to work. I did a quick patch job on the seat there. You can see how that looked. I I liked it. What was terrible is it only did about 65 miles an hour at like 3,500 RPM. And I always remembered that my uncle always wanted the diesel, but he loved the truck. So that's what gave me the idea to put the 12 valve Cummins in it with overdrive, so it could get up to 70 without working real hard. Part of the deal, here we'll go to the next slide. Part of the deal for me getting the truck is that Carl's son wanted to keep the bed. He was going to put it on a truck and keep his dad's bed, and that ended up not happening. The bed ended up in the scrap pile, and I found out about it after it was crushed. I was pretty upset because I would have just put it right back on. I did like the flatbed, always liked the flatbed. I ended up putting boxes on the bottom of the flatbed down here. I ran the truck hauling off my walnuts, and just enjoyed the truck the way it was. Here we go when I put the stake pockets on, and this is the way I drove it around as a daily driver. It's a beautiful truck, but a lot of rust issues were starting to come in. All around the windshield, if you're familiar with 75 Internationals, the windshield is a big spot for rust. Underneath the fenders right here in the vents, that's rust. Right here in the doors. And then I had a big hole up here, so we'll see that. So here you can see where we started stripping it down, getting it ready to restore it. We pulled the engine, pulled it all apart, took the front clip off, again, right down here. This is the big spot for rust. You can see we already started working on this in this video. This is always an issue, and it was a lot of work to fix. The top corner, just terrible. When we actually sandblasted it, that hole got a lot bigger, but I don't think I caught a picture of it. Next slide will show you the sandblasting here. So this is when we sandblasted. We took everything down. I mean, this thing got completely stripped down to bare metal. We even did the frame. Kind of took this picture to see the difference from what the sandblaster does to what it was. At this point, we put a product called Zero Rust on. So the Zero Rust, I use this because it's a rust inhibitor, it's a primer, it does a lot of things for me, but I can work on the truck while this is on it. It sands off very quickly for the different welding and repairs I had to do. So I keep Zero Rust on until it's time to move on to paint and be ready for that. This is the donor 12 valve Cummins I got. Came out of a 93 Dodge 2500. It obviously I rebuilt it. It had 270,000 miles on it, so I rebuilt it. The injection pump had just gotten rebuilt. You can see all the markings on the pump from when they did it. The injection pump only had a few miles on it. I mean, a few thousand, say like 2,000, something like that. So we stripped it down, took it to the machine shop, and built the engine. I actually built the stand to build this engine. This was my first build, so of the 12 valves. Now, one of the really nice things about the 74, 75 Internationals when they're like this, the independent front suspension, the two-wheel drive, is that this 12 valve just bolted right in using the 93 Dodge motor mounts. And I did my best to keep all the parts as the way they were. So the idea is that I can go out and just buy 93 Dodge motor mounts. Or if I have brake issues, I can go out and buy 75 International disc pads. I didn't want to do a bunch of custom stuff there. You can see in the picture here, the power steering pump is just laying over, and then the power steering pump is right here on the 12 valve. So this is the International, and this is the Dodge. So what I ended up doing was I kept the Dodge power steering pump, and I did make a custom power steering lines at this point. couldn't get away from making those custom lines because I wanted to use the factory steering box and the factory power steering pump for the 93 Dodge. So we did that to keep things as simple as possible. Power steering hoses don't break as much as you might find a power steering pump or a steering box, so that was the route I went. Here's a picture of the engine in the truck with the front clip on. I did a lot of modification to the front clip. I had to cut here for the intercooler, I had to cut here for the intercooler and condenser, and then the trim right here had to be really trimmed back to fit the factory 93 Dodge radiator, intercooler, condenser, again, so I can just buy those simple parts and it makes it really easy. Oh, you also, on one other thing right here, you can see it had an engine brake. That was just kind of a bonus. It was on the truck, so I kept it on the engine, on the 93. So I kept it on the engine when I put it in the International here. So we started primering at this point, and again, I'm not a painter, so I just kind of got the primer on because, again, I wanted to seal it up. Shortly after this, it went to the painter, and the painter kind of took over from there because I had the engine in and it was ready. I did one more thing. I put a rear end out of a Ford, same bolt pattern, so I was able to use the same wheels, but it's a Dana 70, so I could get the gear ratio and things that I liked. Now, this one has 410 gears, and I haven't changed it at this point because I think it's going to work fine, but until I actually get the truck on the road and test it, I don't really know. Right here, we put a custom intake because the factory 93 intake was facing right at the brake pot, and there was no way to modify it to get the intercooler tube down to the intercooler. So I also thought the stainless would look really sharp when everything was said and done. Couldn't finish the truck without building a custom dash, so we did. I had built a custom dash earlier that I did with it was a factory dash, and I used fiberglass to kind of fill the square holes, cut it out. It looked really neat. I just wasn't real happy with it. It didn't look as nice as the truck was going to be when I finished. And I had to add 2 extra holes for my pyro and my boost because now we were running a diesel. At this point, we also put a stainless steel cutout that's going to set onto the dash after it's painted. And that International insignia, we did that on the CNC as well. And we got that insignia off the factory International V8 valve covers, so it actually sets perfect on there. The initial plan was to put it on the valve covers, and I did cut more out to put them on the valve covers, so my valve covers are going to look really neat, but it fit perfect on the dash, and so I thought that would look really cool. Here's an example of it actually in. This is right before it went to paint. I wanted to make sure everything was going to work. We've got our extra diesel gauges here, and then the 4 normal gauges you have on any other system. We have speedometer and tach. There is a crankshaft position sensor on the engine, so that's gonna work fine. And right here we have the git rag. The cool thing about the git rag is when I put that engine in, like I said, without making engine mounts. I did have to modify a tranny mount, but I put that in, and the tower fit right into the factory doghouse. I did not cut the doghouse on that. It just seemed like that engine belonged in this truck. This is the day we took it over to paint. We threw the front clip and doors back on the truck to put it on the trailer to take it to paint. Once we got to paint, we pulled the doors off, we pulled the front clip off and the hood so the painter could get a more thorough job with all that stuff off. This is right after he painted it. I got to go take a look at it, and I was real happy with the paint. The gloss looks great. We're calling the color, it's kind of like a navy gray, but we did end up mixing it. We had picked a color, and it wasn't quite dark enough, so we added a little bit of black, so now it makes it a custom color, which sounds cool, but I'm not happy with, because if I have to patch it, we got to try and match it, you know, if there ever has to be touch-up. So not something I'm happy about, but that is what happened. I was able to get my hands on a set of NOS, so new old stock clearance lights, and I think they're just the coolest clearance lights ever put on a truck. So this is when I got it back from paint. This is before I took it for cut and buff. I wanted to assemble, put the doors on, put the front clip on, and then any scratches and things like that could be repaired. This is just an example of how the engine looked. So we're kind of at the end of what we got here for this video to again get you guys caught up on where the truck's at. You can see the custom piping we did for the intercooler. It's also down here. Now at this point, you see the K&N filter setting right here. It was finished here, but at this point we were firing it up and I wanted to have the filter on it. I didn't have this elbow right here. So this is the way we started it initially, and then when the elbow came in, I was able to get the K&N air filter on. You can see the clearance here. It's pretty close. The engine actually pulls that way, so it doesn't get any closer than where it's at. And it looks deceivingly close here, but it's really like 3 inches away, so it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, so that's it, guys. That's getting you caught up on the 75. The next video, I think we're going to probably do the electrical. I do have to address the engine. There was an incident with the engine where somebody put paint thinner in my engine, or in the fuel tank, and it went through the engine, and it was just a mess. So I've got to figure out what the engine needs. I actually have 2 other 12 valves that I've already built that are on the stand. So if this engine is not repairable, I will replace it before we finish this truck. So not excited about that, but I think the first thing we're going to do is a compression check, see where the engine's actually at, and go from there. Yeah, guys, so thanks for watching, and I hope you're interested in the truck. I hope you like the progress, and I'm super excited about finishing it. So like I said, electrical, windows, interior. We're going to put the bed back on. We're going to do a little more modification to the bed because now the bed has to look just as clean as the truck. And when I put the bed on, the bed actually came off of that old Ford that I told you I took the axle out of. So it's got to be cleaned up. It's got fuel ports where it doesn't need to be. There's just going to be a lot of fabrication involved in this project. So again, I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you stay tuned for the rest of this project. It's really important to me, and it's a really important truck. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see you on the next video.